You know what's worse than a man who raises his hand? A man who never does, but still makes you feel small enough to disappear. At least when they're shouting, the world believes you. At least when there are bruises, you have something to show. But what do you say when the pain has no volume and no proof? He doesn't yell. He doesn't hit. He doesn't even raise his voice. No, he just lowers yours. He manages your tone. He makes decisions for you, not with you. He holds the money, your movements, the mood of your home, all in the palm of his hand. And somehow, when you try to explain it to others, you sound ungrateful. They say he's calm. They say he's a good man. They say you're lucky. But deep down, you know what it feels like to live with a man who controls everything except your tears. You still serve him dinner. You still smile at family functions. You still nod along to stories he tells about your life that don't quite match your truth. Because you've learned that speaking up only makes you the villain in his script. And that's the part no one talks about. The silent grief of being erased slowly, emotionally, deliberately, until you no longer recognize the woman in the mirror. Until you begin to wonder if your sadness even counts, because technically, he didn't do anything wrong. But let me ask you this. What do you call it when someone doesn't steal your freedom? They just quietly teach you to stop using it. This is not love. It's control, coded in politeness, wrapped in routines, hidden in plain sight. And if you've ever told the world you are fine, because the truth felt too complicated to explain, because you feared his reaction more than your pain, because you've been gaslit into doubting your own reality, then this story, dear sister, is your voice. And you're not crazy. You're not weak. You've just been surviving in silence. And today we're going to name that silence, so it can never own you again. And if this felt like your life, if you held your breath because the words came too close, then maybe you've been living in a kind of prison no one can see. One lined with politeness, painted with silence, where you wake up every day in a home that looks safe but doesn't feel like yours anymore. Let's be honest quietly. Here, just you and me. You used to feel in control of your life. But now, you check his mood before you speak. You count the cost of things, not just in money, but in peace. You want to go somewhere, but you pause because you don't want to be questioned. You had a voice, but now, even your thoughts feel like whispers. And the worst part? You keep asking yourself, is this even abuse? Or am I just being too sensitive, like he says? No, you're not too sensitive. You're not imagining it. You're being slowly erased. Because when a man controls the money, financial dependency becomes the invisible chain. He handles the money, decides how much is spent, and on what, leaving you with an aching guilt whenever you even think of asking. You feel like you have to earn your basic needs. You hesitate before asking for your own grocery money. And when you finally do, you say, it's not much, don't worry. When a man controls the tone, you monitor your voice, your volume, your expression. You learn which topics to avoid, which truths to dilute, which needs to bury beneath, I'm fine. And then there's the narrative he writes for you before you even get a chance to speak. Your life, your choices, your dreams, edited and filtered until the only story left is the one he approves. You remember days when you had your own voice, when your hopes and fears mattered. Now, your personal narrative is pre-digested, served to you in a format that leaves no space for your true self. It's the story of a woman who's lost herself in the margins of someone else's script. A story so carefully curated that dissent is hushed before it begins. And when he controls the truth, he tells others his version of your marriage. He says you're overdramatic. He makes you doubt your own memory. And when you finally try to speak up, he already told your story before you had a chance. And when he isolates you, he'll say it's out of love. They don't want what's best for us. Your friend talks too much about divorce. I'm just trying to protect you. But what he's really doing is cutting off your lifelines so that the only truth you ever hear is his. And I know you've been told things that made you question your own reality. You're overthinking. You're too emotional. I was just joking. Why are you being so dramatic? But those aren't jokes. That's gaslighting. That's manipulation. That's control wrapped in casual cruelty. And it hurts because you're not just fighting to be heard. You're fighting to still believe in your own voice. And maybe that's the real heartbreak. You used to feel like an equal. Now you feel like a child in your own home, asking for permission, walking on eggshells, second-guessing your needs. But let me say this with my whole heart. You are not wrong for wanting more. You are not selfish for wanting to feel safe. You are not broken because your heart aches in a perfect marriage. You're just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of shrinking. Tired of being everything to someone while becoming nothing to yourself. And no, not everyone will understand, because this kind of pain doesn't leave bruises, but it does leave scars on your confidence, on your identity, on your sense of reality. And that's why this moment matters, because for the first time, maybe you're seeing it for what it really is. And once you see it, dear sister, you can never unsee it again. Let's take a breath. You're not alone in this, and you are not beyond repair. You see, here's what nobody tells you. Control doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like smiling while holding the remote to your entire life. It doesn't shout. It suggests. It doesn't forbid. It nudges. It doesn't lock you in a room. It just makes the outside world feel like a threat until you forget you ever wanted to leave in the first place. And over time, that silence becomes your new normal. Let's be real. You once felt independent, strong, even capable. But now, every decision feels like it needs a second approval. You second guess yourself so often you've forgotten what your first instincts even sound like. You used to speak your mind. Now you rehearse your words before dinner, carefully removing anything that might set him off. You laugh less. You cry more, but quietly in the shower so no one thinks you're unstable. You dream smaller. You talk yourself out of plans, out of passions, out of who you used to be because he wouldn't approve. And honestly, you're too tired to fight. And when you try to explain it, even to the people closest to you, they say you're bitter, dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. But here's the truth, and it might sting at first. They don't see it because they're not the ones living it. They don't feel the weight of handing over your voice a little more each day. They don't know how exhausting it is to be agreeable all the time, to perform happiness while dying of emotional dehydration. Because that's what this is, isn't it? You're starving, not for food, not for comfort, but for recognition, for your feelings to matter, for your no to still mean something, for your yes to not be manipulated. And maybe no one has ever told you this before, but love isn't supposed to cost you yourself. Being a good wife shouldn't mean abandoning the woman you used to be. It's not your job to make peace with emotional captivity. It's not your role to justify behavior that shrinks you. And it's not crazy to want to feel safe in your own story. Here's the shift, dear sister. It's not about whether he hit you. It's about how you feel in his presence. Do you feel heard? Do you feel safe? Do you feel like you matter, even when you disagree? Because if love requires silence, fear, and performance, it's not love. It's submission disguised as stability. And I know, you've learned to minimize your pain, to survive it with elegance, to cry without smudging your makeup, to break without letting anyone see the pieces. But listen closely. You are not broken. You are being broken. And that's not the same thing. This isn't about placing blame. It's about reclaiming clarity. Because until you name it, you can't change it. And now that you see it, you're not powerless anymore. Now that you've named it, you can finally begin to see it for what it is. It wasn't in your head. It was in your home. And no matter how polished the pictures or rehearsed the stories, you know what's really happening behind those closed doors. So what now? How do you begin to heal from a wound so invisible it barely leaves a scar, but somehow bleeds every day First, you educate yourself. Not because you need to justify your pain, but because your pain already makes sense. This kind of control, this emotional manipulation, it has a name. It's called covertabuse. It's called financial captivity. It's called emotional erosion. And the moment you understand it, truly understand it, it loses its power to make you feel like the crazy one. Second, you draw boundaries. You don't need to yell. You don't need to rage. You just need to stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from your silence. Start small. I'm not okay with that. Or I need space to think. Or this doesn't feel right and I won't ignore that anymore. Your boundaries are not aggression. They're self-respect in action. And third, and this one might be the hardest, choose your healing over his comfort. Because sometimes he won't change. Sometimes he'll double down. He'll guilt you, shame you, remind you of your flaws. He'll say no one else would ever put up with you. But that's not love. That's fear weaponized. If he chooses growth, amazing. But if he doesn't, you will still survive. And for the first time, you might actually start to live. You deserve peace. You deserve to be heard when you whisper, not just when you break. You deserve a home that feels like safety, not performance. And if no one has told you this before, let me say it now. You are not difficult. You're not broken. You're not unlovable. You're not asking for too much. You're asking to be treated like a human being with needs, with dreams, with boundaries, with worth. And if he can't hold space for that, then it's time you start holding space for yourself. I know it's hard. I know you've built a life that looks fine from the outside. I know how much energy it takes to keep the illusion alive. But dear sister, you matter. There are thousands of women living behind beautiful curtains and curated smiles, dying quietly inside marriages that slowly erase them. But this is your moment to speak, to breathe, to reclaim what's been taken from you. Because if love costs you your voice, your dignity, your truth, it's not love. It's a cage. And you, beautiful soul, were never meant to live in a cage. If this spoke to a part of you you've been hiding, if it felt like someone finally gave your silence a voice, then this space, this channel, was made for you. You don't need to fix it all today. You don't even need to have the words. All you need is to not be alone with it anymore. Comment below, even if it's just a single word. Seen, or surviving, or starting over. Because sometimes healing begins with a whisper, not a scream. And when you do, you give another woman permission to exhale too. Subscribe not just for content, but for a community that sees past the smiles and into the soul. A place where your pain is not too much, where your questions are valid, where your healing matters. And if this hit home, like this video, so more women trapped behind polite silence can finally hear what you just did. This is not a pity party. This is a revolution of quiet strength. And it starts with you. We're not just telling stories. We're rewriting them together.